I always have found it interesting. We have systems for all types of things in our organization, like accounting. We have systems for pretty much everything, but there really isn't a system for customer centricity.
Welcome to the Buyer-Centric OS. Buyer-Centric OS, a system for revolutionary customer experience. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas. This show helps you turn guesswork into growth by putting your buyer at the center of everything.
Well, Andy, you said before that ideas are easy, but systems are hard. Why would you say that is especially true when it comes to buyer-first thinking?
Yeah, I think that especially with buyer-first thinking, we see it often as an emotional thing or a philosophical thing. Are you feeling the customer, right? And I think a lot of people think that way. We also talked earlier about the four forces that pull us away from the buyer, things like deadlines and, red tape within our organization, all of these things. So I think it's easy to be pulled away if you don't have a system. And I always have found it interesting. We have systems for all types of things in our organization, like accounting. We have systems for pretty much everything, but there really isn't a system for customer centricity in most cases, something that is truly installable and can be followed on a regular basis. And so I think, organizations that do want to become customer centric, which also helps drive growth, need to systematize it rather than, just making it a philosophy or a cool poster on the wall.
So I know we've broken this out in a few different areas, and you want to bring up that graphic and talk through kind of our rituals first?
So I call this the, Buyer-Centric Framework, and it's really four key elements that help create the foundation for how you systemize these things. The first one is really rituals. Rituals are about ongoing cadences that you develop and questions that you can ask within the organization. A ritual would be that, at every team meeting, you're asking a question to the entire team. What did we learn about our customers last week? Right? And so you're starting to build in these rituals within the organization that in weekly meetings, monthly, quarterly, you're asking the right questions and you're making sure that they are aligned to buyers. And it's not just about, how many leads did we get or what's our revenue at or did we ship this product or this feature in our product. It's more about, did the customer enjoy the feature that we shipped? Have we talked to customers recently? It's really about, creating these rituals that make sure that we're staying focused on our customers.
Right.
And then we've really got regimens. This is where you build the muscle. These are actions that you take to stay aligned to customers. These are things like the product team, before they move into their next feature and they're planning out their roadmap or they're just gut checking the roadmap, they go and talk to 10 customers. So that's an action that they take. Marketing, before they launch a campaign, they go through a checklist that says, hey, yes, this message aligns to a buyer pain that we have. Yes, our landing page speaks to these things. Yes, our content is providing value based on what we understand about the buyer. And so really, regimens are that action and they build muscle. They're things that we're doing. We're lifting, and we're actually doing things. So rituals are, again, that rhythm, making sure that we do it and we're asking questions, and regimens are the actions that give us the strength.
Right. And you mentioned muscle, and I was going to say those create like the muscle memory that we're going to, our, whatever we're doing is buyer-centric by habit, and we become just locked in on that.
100%. And the next one is really vitals. Are we measuring, right? And so now we are exercising, but are we measuring our heart rate? Are we measuring, the change that is happening based off of, buyers and customers? And so this is really a shift a lot of times in mindset from, marketing, where they're looking at metrics like the number of opens and the number of clicks, to how do you build combined viewpoints of metrics that determine whether you resonated with the customer. And so instead of the number of clicks, you're looking more at length of time that they spend on a page, as well as how many pages they viewed. And you're really trying to connect, the dots more towards how do we determine whether we resonated with the customer in marketing. In product, it's stickiness and use. It's that North Star metric that people talk about, where, you create a metric that clearly defines that your customer got value out of your product. Sales, same thing. And so it's really about vitals, not getting rid of your other metrics, but making sure that you always have a customer buyer viewpoint on the metrics that you have, so that when you do your rituals, you do regimens, that you can actually measure the impact of doing those things.
Yeah, and with those vitals, I think you're really focused on very meaningful vitals and metrics, because if it's not buyer-centric and you're measuring it, you might be missing the boat a little bit. So I don't think that when people think about a shift, shifting what the metrics they're looking at, shouldn't be a scary thing. This is just really interpreting it through that precise lens of understanding the customer.
100%. And the final one, and really it's the first one at the end of the day, is the twins, which are a clear representation of who the buyer is. We can't have rituals, we can't have regimens, our vitals, all of that depends on having this really clear picture of who our buyers and customers are. And being able to use that in a simulated way, like we've talked about, where you can actually engage with them and get feedback. And so twins are that representation in this framework of the customer that should be in every meeting, that should, be looked at before you create a campaign. The twin is a true embodiment of the customer that is in every discussion that we have. And so then when we pull these four together, we have a clear understanding of the customer. We're creating these cadence patterns of asking the right questions. We've got actions that, are set, that we say, before we do this, we must go and talk to 5 customers, right? And then vitals that measure it. And so this framework really is what creates a system that if we build all of these pieces, we really know that our organization is operating as a customer-centric organization. And we should really have that clear understanding that, we are following a process that makes us customer-centric.
And what I see when I look at this graphic, this is creating that feedback loop to continue to improve and get more focused in on that buyer-centric approach, looking at that perspective from the buyer, using the twin, going through the rituals, regimens, tracking, and then kind of improvements.
Yeah, these things all feed each other. I think that's one of the important things to point out for sure, is that, your rituals, when you're asking these questions, will help inform what your twin looks like. Your twin informs, what the regimens are, because you're looking at it. Regimens tie into vitals, and then the vitals will come back around and help give a sense of, okay, are our twins accurate to the viewpoint that we have? And so I think there's a way to really, again, within the system, see all these pieces working together. What you want to avoid, I think, in a lot of cases, is just one of these, right? That you create great twins. You really understand your customer, but you're not talking about it in meetings. You don't have actions that make sure that before somebody does something, they come back to the twin, and we don't have vitals that are actually measuring what customers care about. They're only measuring what we care about. You can't have just rituals where you ask questions, but then you're not turning that into action, and you're not measuring whether those questions are actually impacting the organization. And so I really think when you think of systems, these are the elements that without them, the system falls apart.
Makes a lot of sense. And for our upcoming shows, we're going to dive into some of these aspects a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so the next chapters of the book, the Buyer-Centric Operating System, go into each of these in detail. So really talking about what they look like. What are the rituals that you can do in marketing and sales? What are the regimens that you can actually implement? What are the vitals that you should be looking at? And how do you create twins? The first one is actually the twins, because we start there to say, let's create an accurate viewpoint of our customers, and that let's have a tool that we can use that we can have as a reflective lens every day as we go through rituals and regimens and vitals. So we'll be diving into each of these in depth to really talk about how the rubber meets the road at the end of the day.
Awesome. And if you want to follow along, check out the book, The Buyer-Centric Operating System. It is available on Amazon and elsewhere. And if you want to dive into the twins, if you want to check out buyertwin.com, that's the tool that we use, and we'll be talking a lot more of that in our upcoming episodes. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the Buyer-Centric OS. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and grab your copy of the Buyer-Centric Operating System by Andy Halko, available now on Amazon. For more tools and insights, visit andyhalko.com.